And one of the other features of this new populism is that it actually explicitly relies on pointing to established politics as being condescending and smug, and this is what we see all the time. This is what we still see. If you have populist politicians coming to power, the opposition still holds this rhetoric. I mean, I read the New York Times with great enthusiasm every day, and you still, the tone has not changed since the elections, and I think this is no wonder that I think it was a few days ago that close to 80 or 90% of Trump voters would not have changed their electoral preferences. Why would they have been? I mean, the whole discourse has been set this way. So I think what's really interesting is to look at how the political discourse goes. Northwestern European populism has three very important features. One of them is, and what we see is that Islam is in the center. So you see that this is a civilizationist form of populism and nationalism in a way, where Islam is the constitutive other, and everything is framed in this way. So we have, and it kind of leads to what he calls and others call identitarian Christianism, which has nothing, where not the religious aspect is important, but the culture one. So Islam is portrayed, and of course Muslim, immigrant communities portrayed as backwards, and everything else, the new identity of this sort of within these new populisms is something that is portrayed in juxtaposition to this. So Islam is seen as backward. Islam is seen as representing all the values that we Europeans are not. And an ironic feature, or an important feature, is this. Okay, what comes from this? One of them that comes from this is, and I think what's also interesting is that in these new populisms, the classic traditional sort of division between left and right don't really make sense. So what we see, for example, in this northwestern new nationalist populist discourse is, for example, an openness to the inclusion of sexual minorities, the LGBT movement, which is traditionally not something you've seen in the Rhine, which is also an electoral strategy, saying that again, and very similarly, what we see is a philo-Semitic term that is traditionally anti-Semitism has been incorporated in the populist, and especially right-wing populist, discourse. But here again, it's been repositioned that you are similar victims of this, all the evil that Islam represents. We also see an endorsement of course, very selective free speech. This is again what Brubaker talks a lot about. Of course, free speech involves an action against, well, political correctness, especially when it relates to hate speech, which or anti-Islamophobic hate speech. Let's make that point. Of course, other forms of freedom are not that important when it comes to surveillance and policing, etc. But what's interesting here is that liberalism is seen as a very core and important feature of this sort of northwestern populism and northwestern nationalism and northwestern European populist movement. So here, liberalism is something that is the evil. So whereas Islam is the constitutive other in the northwestern form of populism and nationalism, here what we see is the involvement of liberalism, that again is a symbol that symbolizes everything that populism goes against. So the insecurity brought by globalization and cosmopolitanism and all that. So illiberalism is something that is seen as anti-national, is seen as one of the devils that these populisms are happily identifying themselves against. And I think this is the very important feature of these new populisms, is that it's messages, it's discourses. You don't really need to have institutional political strategies. I think, the term you very often hear here is disenchantment. It's something that democracy and the sort of these fundamental principles of human rights and whatever have lost their appeal. There's disillusionment in the entire sort of political life and public life, and disenchantment only builds on these negative feelings. New populisms rely on demonizing the political other, domestic cold wars. You see that in the US, you see that everywhere or in most places in Europe. This is what populist leaders are doing, demonizing the others, and again, creating a suffocating Cold War-based environment.